Oh, I've got imposter syndrome. Too easy to say. That needs unpacking because I think imposter syndrome itself is a bit of a fake. What if imposter syndrome itself is playing tricks on you? What lies behind those two easy to say words, much easier, by the way, than the original imposter phenomenon? And what if you are just labeling yourself, not exploring it? I think it's time to turn detective and crack open the case because it is another self-belief squashing crime. Get your magnifying glass out. I'm about to examine the evidence. Is your imposter syndrome true or false? What are the red herrings that you've been running with? So in this short video, I'm going to quickly sum up the frequently used definition, imposter syndrome, but then more importantly, I'm going to quickly move on to what I think are three alternative explanations for how you feel when you say or think, I've got imposter syndrome. I feel like an imposter. And those three fall very nicely into what I call the fibs that hold us back: fears, illusions, and baggage. So fear of being yourself is number one. We'll unpack that. Number two, illusions about others. And number three, a bit of baggage. You're not seeing your value and you're over giving as a result. And then I'm going to point you towards a couple of really good self-assessment quizzes, which you can do for fun. They're quite revealing. And I'm going to do a reality check on those three alternatives to imposter syndrome. And the good thing about that is that they're much more simple to unravel and to work on. And that's what I'm going to do, because I'm going to give you three really powerful, tried and tested reframes which deal with these three alternatives to imposter syndrome. I'm just going to read you out of this very old book here, 1984, I think it was. If I'm so successful, why do I feel like a fraud? The Imposter Phenomenon, by Harvey and Katz. It's a bit of a classic. The whole thing starts off with a chapter called The Terrible Secret. And this is a real person describing how they feel. It's Leslie, and she's a graphic designer. It's a feeling of fear. I always have the sense that I'm not going to get the job done and that I'm not necessarily qualified to do it, that I'm never going to pull it off or give them whatever it is they want. And it creates a sense of panic in me that they're going to find out I'm doing a terrible job and should be fired and that I'll never work again. Ring any bells? You hear words like imposter, fake, fraud. And the thing is that there are real fakes and frauds. There are fake paintings. There are fake people. There are people who are deliberately pretending to be something they're not. So, it's not like that doesn't exist, but it isn't what's going on with you, I don't think. I confess that I did once take a job when I was in my 20s, slightly pretending that I knew a lot about this thing. But actually, all I'd done was I'd found a dummy's guide to this thing the previous day, and I'd swatted up on it. Was able to get away in the interview with making it sound like I knew my thing. That was fake. That was me being a fraud. I learned on the job, but you know what? I never felt comfortable. Of course I didn't, because I was building on such shaky foundations. And yeah, the feeling that I was going to be found out was very real. Again, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you actually having plenty of skills, plenty to offer, either in your relationships, your social life, or work, and yet not seeing it for what it is and not feeling that you're giving what people want and having this really odd sense that any minute now they're going to see you for what you are, which is not as nice or as clever or as helpful as they're being fooled into thinking you are. Here's a good example. I have a background as an actor, highly experienced, good. And I've done countless one-woman plays and pieces of entertainment, which is quite a scary thing to do. But through practice, through experience, I'm good at it. But I frequently used to turn up to do these things, and I'd do the thing well and then meet the audience afterwards. And they were saying all these really lovely things. And I couldn't bear it. And I needed to escape as quickly as possible, make some excuse, get into my car and drive off. And even then, when I was driving off, I had this odd feeling in my gut that they were now saying, oh, I don't know why we said all these nice things about Trisha's performance. It wasn't that good, was it? I think we were overblowing the ridiculous. All the evidence was there. I had good reviews. I had thank you letters. I had everything I could need to tell me it was real. And actually, I kind of knew that I'd done a good job. And yet you get this odd little glitch where you still think it's not enough. You're fooling people. Right. So I know that feeling. And it was, in fact, when I set up a business when I was 60, that I really had all these demons throw themselves in my face. I had always had these odd feelings, but I didn't recognize them. I didn't even know how to talk about them. And also nobody talked about imposter syndrome when I was growing up. I knew that something was wrong. I knew that I wasn't enjoying things like networking events and even coaching sessions. I was getting so frazzled out beforehand, thinking I'm not going to give enough. It won't be enough value. This person is paying for me. Oh no, they're going to go away and think, what a waste of money. I had to do something. And it was at that point that I began exploring imposter syndrome. And yes, there was a lot in that was really useful. But then I moved on to think, but is it just that? Is there another explanation? And by just chucking that label at everything, is that causing us to not see more everyday stuff, if you like, very human stuff that is more manageable? Hence why I came up with the term self-squashing, wrote the book, The Mystery of the Squashed Self, and did the TEDx talk, Beware the Self-Squashing Prophecy. It was all about something that was slightly different from imposter syndrome. And in it, really, are these three things that I said we were going to unpack. So yes, basic definition, the research was done amongst high-achieving women originally, done in 1978, so only a sort of fairly small microcosm of society. But I suppose the main point that came out was that these people were high-achieving, they were ambitious, they were highly intelligent, academic people, but didn't believe it, were surprised when they got good results from their university exams, etc. Oh, I can give a story about that as well. I once took part in a one-act play festival, and I had a fairly major part in this play. And it was big, it was international. And at the end, there was the awards, but like the Oscars and BAFTAs. And I was so not thinking that I would get any award. I mean, it hadn't even entered my head. I was thinking I'd got away with it and I'd done a reasonable job at this part, in quite an intense, heavy play. But I'd gone off for the day with my friend. It was the last day we were overseas, and I had come back looking a bit tatty. I actually had a ladder in my tights. And then all of a sudden, we're sat in this huge auditorium and these people up on the stage, and almost like a disconnected out-of-body experience, I hear my name. And I actually got the Best Actress award. That's just an example of how there is this kind of out-of-body thing going on. It's not that you're useless, it's that you don't see it, you don't believe it. And worse than that is when you actually are absolutely sure that you're getting away with it and going to be found out. And what happens? Well, this thing called the imposter cycle, which is I'll put some really useful links. In fact, all of this is on my website, including the 2 tests that I said I'd point you towards that you can do yourself. So original research, Dr. Pauline Clance, the imposter cycle. So you are worried that you're not going to be giving enough to whatever this is. You overwork, or you procrastinate because you just you get the deadline, you do it, you think you've maybe got away with it, and then you get really good feedback on this piece of work or this talk you've done or whatever it is, this presentation. And guess what? You don't give yourself any credit for that. It's the same as not giving yourself any credit for compliments, because you assume that you're getting away with it. It was a fluke. You did it all at the last minute and got away with it, or you really worked so blinking hard 24/7 for weeks over it because that was the only way you could achieve it. So you've either, whatever it is, you're just not saying to yourself, I did a good job. There we go. And then, of course, you go round in circles because you now think the only way you're going to get the approval is, again, by either overworking or perhaps some fluke. It's not very restful, is it? It's not a very joyful way to exist. And it feels to me also like it's full of lots of masks and walls, and that's not ideal. So let's look at those 3 things that I think it might be, rather than just saying, I've got imposter syndrome. So number 1, fear of being yourself. Let's just say you got a job because you were charming and you did a lot of charming, charismatic stuff, either by flicking your hair or just by, being very good at chat, at smooth talk or whatever. Now you've got it, you are really concerned that anything less than this charismatic, charming act will have you chucked out, because that's the only reason you're there. Or you are constantly feeling that you're okay if you just blend in with the crowd, okay? Don't sort of stand out too much, because you know what happens when you do that? People think you're showing off. People think you're a bit of a clever clogs. Nobody likes that. Do you remember that boyfriend that you really loved, but he went off you because you did really well in exams? Do you remember that moment that your relative said, oh, nobody likes a show off? Do you remember when you put your hand up in class and then all your classmates bullied you afterwards because they said, oh, he's such a clever clogs? And do you remember the feeling of not putting your hand up for fear of being labelled as a know-it-all? Yeah. Do you remember the feeling of not taking an opportunity to get up on a little platform, a stage of some sort, go out in front? Because, well, they'll all just think I'm, who the hell is she? Who does she think she is? You're just afraid of all those things, of being rejected, basically. There's a big personality in there, or there's a quirky personality, or there's a very intriguing personality of whatever it is. And you just think, no, it's not going to work. I can't let that out. Now, if you're just constantly wearing that mask, suppressed, of course, you're going to feel weird. And within that weirdness lies the feeling of being an imposter. So that's number 1, self-squashing, basically. Number 2, you have an illusion about everybody else. So you assume, it's a sort of comparisonitis thing, isn't it? You assume that people are all just doing a wonderful job, and they know it, and they're good at what they do, and they're better than you, and they're more successful, and they're more professional, and they're better looking. I don't know what it is, but you just sort of assume that they're going around with this wonderful confidence. Well, most people aren't. Even the most beautiful people, the most successful people are going to have a head full of demons. They're going to have all the inner negative thoughts because we're wired for negative thoughts. They're going to doubt themselves. And in fact, the more successful they are, even maybe the more attractive they are, the more they might have all those doubts. So you're working on an assumption that everybody else is normal and you're the somehow deficient one and an imposter. So that's a sort of mind reading thing that you need to realize you can't do. You're also working under a assumption about yourself, you know, maybe all those labels that you were given as you were growing up. Now that brings us to baggage, and baggage can mean not seeing your value. Maybe you weren't given a lot of praise when you were growing up. Maybe you were told, you know, that made you big-headed. So, no, you know, maybe you felt you had to do a lot of pleasing, fawning, which is another expression, in order to be accepted. You know, there's baggage there, and it could be your childhood, it could be influential figures as you were growing up, it could be your first job, it could be school, it could be college, it could be all sorts of things, a narcissistic relationship issue, whatever it is, you don't trust your value, your worth. And so as a result, you overgive. But that overgiving still leaves you thinking, I'm not giving enough. And that's a kind of imposter thing, isn't it? So those three things, they might sound pretty ghastly, but they're all very human. And therefore, it's now a little bit easier maybe to just say, oh, I can do something about this. I'm not weird. I'm just me being human. I'm just maybe a little bit oversensitive about this. I've got a little bit of trigger stuff going on with this. I overthink this. And yeah. And actually, if I talk about this to somebody, I'll probably realize they're feeling like this too. So yeah, let's get a bit more real about this. That way, you're not just secretly embedding the I've got imposter syndrome thing, because that's just going to get stuck forever. Don't want that. We need to evolve and grow and try and observe and experiment and succeed and fail and all those things that make us human. So that brings us to the little reframes I said I'd give you. Are you ready? So number one, feel the discomfort. Feelings are feelings, and they're very, very meaningful, okay? But they're not facts necessarily. So feel the discomfort. So I feel like an imposter isn't the same as I am an imposter, okay? Feel it, whatever it is. I'm not being myself. I'm not feeling that I'm valuable enough. I'm comparing myself to others, and say, feel it, name it, and unpack it. That's out on the forensics table, much better than twirling around in a swamp in your head. So ask yourself, is it 1, 2, or 3 of the things I've just mentioned? Am I not being myself out of some weird fear? Am I assuming others are all better than me? Am I not really owning my value? You know, we're getting more forensic. We're looking for the clues. We're making connections. So much healthier than just ruminating. And then do some mantras. So for number one, it would be something like, I've written them down in my little book, but I've done these myself. I'm not showing off. I'm showing up to share. So when you feel you're not being yourself, that's a good one. Being myself won't limit me. This is all unpacked, by the way, in my book, which I'll give you a link to as well here. Number 2, the comparisonitis things, illusions about others. They will have the same inner self-doubt chatter as me, and we can learn from each other if we share a bit more. And number 3, the not seeing your worth baggage. Not everyone can do what I do. Reminder to self. Being a good ... You put your thing in. Being a good listener is a valuable skill. Value doesn't need to be showy. So, falling down self-doubt spirals is extremely human, and it doesn't need to be a forever label of imposter syndrome. No. Because when you spot the feelings and the habits regularly, you get a lot better at clinging onto the edge of that spiral and pulling yourself back up quickly before you tumble all the way down to the bottom and wallow in self-doubt and feelings of being an imposter for weeks, months, years. And that's that. If you feel that this is helpful, it's helpful for your self-belief unsquashing generally, your very human stuff, then I'd love you to subscribe and to share and to like, because I just think this could be helpful to someone else too, couldn't it? I hope, just to ease them from their own self-squashing habits, because that way you can feel more like you're doing a jig with joy, impact, and growth.